In the traditions, the mythology, the stories of Buddhism, after the Bodhi tree, the most significant tree is the Sal tree. So if you go to the Jatakas, you find quite a lot of stories where the Sal tree plays a part. For example, there's one story which talks about the fact that when all the trees in the forest grew close together, and when a storm came, they all survived the storm, whereas one tree that wanted to grow separately from the others was overthrown. In other words, the purpose of the story is united we stand, divided we fall. According to some legends, the Buddha was born under a Sal tree. But when it comes to actually history, the Sal tree is important because, according to the Mahaparinirvana Sutta, which is the longest sutta in the Tipitaka, the Buddha, when he arrived in Kusinara, tired and exhausted and ill, he lay down between two great Sal trees. And probably one of the most beautiful stories in the Buddha's life is that as he did that, the tree burst spontaneously into blossom, and the petals from the Sal tree showered down on him. And he took the opportunity to make a very important point. Ananda said to him that he was amazed. Mother Nature herself was paying reverence to the Buddha. And the Buddha said, well, yes, that is true, but the monk or the nun, the layman or the laywoman, who genuinely, sincerely, and to the best of their ability try to abide by the Dhamma, they pay the highest homage to the Tathagata. So I take this story to mean that while worshipping the Buddha with flowers and what have you, and incense and chanting is a good thing, far more important than that is to actually know the Dhamma, practice it fully, and to share it with others. So there are, as I said, quite a lot of incidents where this tree has some role to play in the stories that are common to many Buddhist traditions. What is interesting is that there seems to be a widespread misunderstanding as to what actually the Sal tree is. You only have to go to Google image and put in Sal flower, and you'll find almost no pictures of the real Sal flower. If you get to some contemporary paintings of the life of the Buddha, for example, his birth, it will show him very prominently the tree and the flower, but it's not the Sal tree. So what I'd like to talk about this afternoon, very briefly, is what constitutes the real Sal tree, that is, the tree under which the Buddha passed away, the tree that has a part to play in various Buddhist stories and legends, and how this misunderstanding about what really the real Sal tree is came about. So let's start with this. So the Sal tree, its botanical name is Shorea robusta. It's a North Indian tree. In fact, it is still the main timber tree in India. The timber industry really is supported in North India by Sal timber, which is a very strong and enduring timber. It can grow to great size, although it's very rare to find very large ones nowadays because they're usually all cut down for commercial purposes. But if you go to some of the national parks in India, and in two national parks in southern Nepal, you'll come across huge Sal trees, probably hundreds of years old. And the thing about it is that apart from this being a very majestic tree, when it's allowed to grow to a great size, it has a particularly beautiful flower. It's an orange flower, and it has a sort of a jasmine-like perfume. And when it's in blossom, if you're in a sal forest, and occasionally you can still find some sal forests, the fragrance from the flowers is really something really quite delightful. And in fact, I think there's a sutta where I think it's Anuruddha mentions that how beautiful the sal forest is in the evening when the perfume is wafting through the air. However, it seems that for the most part, as unfortunately often happens, Buddhists get the details wrong. So until very recently, I noticed that the article on the Sal Tree on Wikipedia got it all wrong. I noticed a beautiful book published recently with delightful drawings, paintings in them, on the life of the Buddha, and they had the Buddha's birth, and when the picture of the tree he was born under, well, they got it wrong. You can go to numerous websites and you'll get a tree, a flower, other than the Sal tree. And in actual fact, the picture that you'll get is a beautiful pink flower, which is actually a native of what was British Guiana and Brazil. In the coastal areas of British Guiana and Brazil, this tree, which is, its English name is the Cannonball tree, it grows there. And for some reason, I have a theory, I got quite a lot of theories, I have a theory how this misunderstanding came about. Because this tree could not have been the one that the Buddha passed away under, because it didn't exist in India at that time. It's a native of Brazil and Guyana. So how did this misunderstanding come about? And why is it so prevalent? Well, this is my idea. Sri Lanka was for over 100 years under Portuguese domination, and of course Brazil was too. On the other hand, Sri Lanka was under British domination for about 100 years too, and so was British Guiana. That's interesting. Now, the Cannonball tree, the one that is always confused with the Sal tree, is really not very economically important. Its timber is rather porous, so it doesn't really make particularly good timber. Its fruit, which is, well, it's like a cannonball, hence the English name, large round fruit like this, is not edible. In fact, I don't know anything of any value, economic value, for the cannonball tree, other than the fact that it makes a beautiful tree for your garden, because when it's in blossom, it's really extravagantly beautiful. So at the time that the Portuguese dominated Sri Lanka, they certainly weren't mainly interested in beauty. They were mainly interested in economically exploiting the country. When the British came to Sri Lanka, they likewise were there not mainly they were there mainly for economic reasons. However, the British have a great love of gardens. That's sort of the national hobby in England. They really love gardens. So I'm going to speculate that the cannonball tree was introduced into Sri Lanka by the British. And it was planted in the Royal Botanical Gardens in Peradeniya, from where it spread, and people grew this tree because it's so lovely and its perfume is really lovely. Now, the Sri Lankans the majority of Sri Lankans are Buddhists, and they knew, those who are well versed in Buddhism, knew that the Buddha died or passed away under a sal tree. Now, they've never seen a sal tree because sal trees just don't grow there, okay? But they did see the cannonball tree with its beautiful pink flower. Now, the interesting thing about the Sal tree is in the middle its stamens are sort of bent like this. And if you open the stamens just a little bit and you look inside, you can see something really quite marvellous. It looks exactly like a small creamy white stupa. That's right, just like a small white stupa. So I'm going to speculate that when the Sri Lankans first saw a sal tree, a cannonball tree, and they looked inside and saw this little stupa, and we know that the Buddha's ashes were buried under a stupa, and we know that the Buddha died under a sal tree, they automatically thought, well, this must be the tree that he passed away under. And so they came to believe, as they nearly all do today, that the cannonball tree is the sal tree. I'm speculating that this is how this misunderstanding first came about. Then how did this misunderstanding spread everywhere else, to Thailand, to Burma, amongst Western Buddhists? How did this happen? Well, I'm going to speculate again. It seems that when Westerners first started to become interested in Buddhism, they read translations of Buddhist texts. But when the first monks from traditional Buddhist countries came to the West, almost all of them originally were Sri Lankans. Why? Because if you had a Buddhist monk anywhere who knew English, they probably weren't from Tibet. They certainly weren't from Thailand. English was little known in those days. For the same reason, they probably weren't from Burma. The majority of them were probably Sri Lankans. Why? Because they had at least some skills in English, and they were the ones who first came, and they, coming from a culture which mistakenly thought that the cannonball tree is the sal tree, they started to disseminate this misunderstanding, and from there it became widespread. Now, quite a few years ago, over 20 years ago, I wrote an article on this confusion, and at that time I went to Wikipedia article on Sal Tree, and I found that they had it all wrong. Just looking at it, just recently I found that finally they got it all right. I hope it had something to do with my article. Now, the last thing I just want to talk about, is this important? I mean, is it really significant in Buddhism that we make a mistake between the sal tree and the cannonball tree? Well, from one point of view, it isn't really very important. There are far more important things in Buddhism than some basic botanical understanding. On the other hand, it's very easy to find out the facts. The difference between the sal flower, which is small and yellow, and the cannonball flower, which is large and pink, the differences are big enough. So I wonder why it is that a simple, easily available information and visually, immediately obvious difference, why we can't get it right. Hopefully we Buddhists will start exploring our traditions, including our myths and stories, and trying to get the facts right, rather than continually repeating small and, from one point of view, insignificant misunderstandings. It's easy enough to find the facts. Let's try to get them.